BC, a feast celebrating the vernal equinox, has at its center a wildebeest roast. 1198 AD, a feast celebrating the English conquest of the French, includes elk, swan, and bear roasts. 2001 AD, a feast celebrating the nuptials of Margaret and Harold Wilson, has at its center a roast beef.
Since the dawn of cuisine, no feast has been complete without a big old hunk of roast beast. Trouble is that every time a modern cook reaches for one of those skimpy little single-serving cuts, the roast in its marvelous mound of leftovers comes just a little bit closer to extinction. And that is a real shame, because if history has taught us anything, it's that no matter how lame the toast, a good roast is always good eats. Again? Like barbecue, toast, and cream, the word roast suffers from multiple meaning disorder. Among its many connotations, roast can refer to the exposure of food to dry heat, like chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Roast can also mean any cut of meat that can be or has been prepared by such action. Technically, this means that pot roast isn't really a roast at all because it's braised, not roasted. Now, regardless of the critter from which it comes, all true roasts share certain common physical shapes. For one thing, they've got a low surface to mass ratio, meaning they're shaped more like a Sputnik than a dictionary. They also work and play well with dry heat, and that means they've got to come from tender regions of the body. Take a look. Regardless of the quadruped in question, any map of the roast world would have to include the rib and loin primals, as well as the tenderloin, and maybe to a lesser extent the sirloin, parts of the rump, and parts of the inside round. All muscles that either do, well, almost no work or just a little bit of work. Sounds simple, right? And yet, ironically, the hardest part about roasting is finding the right roast to roast. Question: how can any culture that has more lawyers than butchers call itself a civilization?
Hey, my brother's a lawyer.
Ooh, the shame your parents must bear.
Well, at least they still have me.
True. Tell me, what do you roast when you want to roast something really special?
Ah, that's easy. It would have to be a standing rib roast.
Ah, he must mean a prime rib.
Not necessarily. There's a difference there. Prime rib must come from prime beef. Otherwise, it's just a standing rib roast.
Prime is the solid gold watch of the beef world. It's beautifully formed and heavily marbled. You notice there's not a lot of fat around the meat, but there's a good bit inside the meat. That means it's going to melt in your mouth when it's cooked. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of prime out there, so you're going to be hard-pressed to find it outside of a top steakhouse or a specialty butcher shop. Personally, I'm more than happy to cook and consume a piece of prime beef, as long as somebody else is paying for it. One notch down is choice beef. It's kind of like the watch you'd wear to work and to the occasional wedding. There's not as much intramuscular fat, and there's a little more around the outer mass, but there's plenty of beef flavor here and a relatively high meat-to-bone ratio. When I'm buying, I usually buy choice. Next down is select. Select's kind of like, you know, that watch you keep in your desk at work when you leave your real watch at home. There's a good bit of bone, a good bit of connective tissue, and it's kind of chewy. The truth is, most butchers don't even deal with this stuff, except as stew meat. It makes great stew because a lot of connective tissue. When it comes to roast, I'll take that one.
That's a great piece of meat, Mr. B, but I'd suggest this one.
What's the deal? They're both rib roasts.
It's often the same rib cut, but this comes from the loin end.
What difference does that make?
It's got one less connective tissue, and also it has less bone mass in there as well. So pound for pound, dollar for dollar, you're getting more meat.
So let me get this straight. Same cut, better value, less money.
That's correct.
I'll take 4 bones worth. Another great reason for having your own personal butcher. Of course, when you're buying beef these days, you're going to run into some other terms you're going to be curious about. All natural, certified organic, hormone-free, for instance. Want to find out more about those? Check out foodtv.com. Chris, thanks for setting me up, man. Just put this on my tab, okay?
Mr. B, I'm going to need some cash.
Oh, bother. Like balsamic vinegar and hard cheese, beef improves with age. That's because, like vinegar and cheese, beef is mostly water. In fact, about 8.5 pounds of this 10.5 pound roast is indeed H2O, a substance not famous for its flavor. However, in just a few days, we can eliminate enough of that water to seriously intensify the flavor of the meat. This is going to take time, but that's okay, because meanwhile, enzymes inside the meat will be hard at work breaking down connective tissue, and that means a more tender piece of meat. Of course, there's a not so wide line between aging and rotting, so we have to observe some guidelines. We need a temperature between 36 and 38 degrees, humidity around 50%, and plenty of air circulation. Sounds like a job for
your friendly neighborhood chill chest. Now, you could leave the roast just hanging around on a plate, but we are talking about raw meat here. That's why I cover mine with this prolifically perforated plastic bin. The holes promote airflow while the meat's juices are safely sequestered. Now, just put this as far back and down in your fridge as possible. How long? Well, as little as 24 hours would make a difference, but for a 10-pounder like this, 72 would be a lot better. Oh, you do have one of these, don't you? 3 days later, and the meat definitely looks dry on the outside. How dry is it really? Well, wow, 9 pounds. That's a loss of something like 12.7%. That means the meat's going to taste that much more intense and be that much more tender. Now, if you've aged more than a couple of days, you might notice some little leathery spots on the meat. That's okay. Just trim them off, making the cuts as shallow as possible. You may also notice a slightly funky aroma. That's okay. The smell of success. Now just cover and leave on the counter for an hour. By starting with a room temperature roast, there's going to be less of a differential between the oven and the inner core of the meat, and that is going to help the roast to cook more evenly throughout. Also gives us time to consider the cooking apparatus itself. To illustrate how utterly elementary roasting a great roast is, I have opted to roast my roast here in my brother's oven. Now, don't worry, he's not going to miss it. He's at an orthodontist convention in Vegas. Besides, I'm not sure he'd miss it even if he was here. Now, do we brave a look inside? I'm afraid we must. Hey, I figured that mixer for a goner. You know, most of us, certainly my brother, take this space for granted, even abuse a little. And that's bad, because when it comes to ovens, cleanliness is next to hotliness. Now, let's say for just a minute that this is the interior of a really clean oven. Okay, now depending on whether you own gas or electric, when you turn that thermostat to bake, one of two things is going to happen. Either an electric coil located right along the floor is going to start glowing red, or a gas burner located just under the floor is going to fire. Either way, the air near the floor is going to absorb heat, expand, and go up to your food. There, it's going to give up some of its heat and return a little bit cooler, thus setting up a convection current, which, if you have a convection oven, is going to be enhanced by an electric fan. But there's something else going on here, too. Infrared waves are being emitted either by the coil or by the oven floor itself. Now, these waves are going to ricochet all around the oven. At a given time, they're going to hit your food from just about every angle, just even the nooks and crannies of this chicken. Now, since there's a pan protecting your food from direct thermal onslaught, this is a relatively mild cooking method. I mean, this doesn't carry the kind of energy wump as 350-degree oil. Therein lies the essence of roasting, even omnidirectional heat. But what happens if your oven walls are all scummed up? Now the energy meant for your roast is being either deflected by or absorbed by the grunge on your oven walls. Now, it's not to say that your beast isn't going to take a few hits here and there, but believe me, in the end, it's going to end up being done on one side and underdone on the other. Well, there's no way my roast is going to get a fair trial in here. I could take the time to run it through maybe 3 or 4 self-cleaning cycles, but I can also find an intermediary structure. Excuse me a moment. Now, if I remember correctly, the original Dutch ovens were made of brick, not cast iron. And that makes sense because nothing heats as evenly as ceramic. Now, this
terracotta planter borrowed from a neighbor is going to soak up whatever heat this thermogeyser can generate and then radiate it evenly to the roast. Now, to avoid thermal shock, we're going to start this in a cold oven. Oh, and since we're going to want to make a pan sauce, we're going to need another vessel that will fit inside, just big enough to hold the roast. Now, we will bring this up to heat, but remember, never, ever trust an oven. Most reliable roast recipes suggest a two-tiered cooking approach. First, you sear the meat over high heat in order to create a golden brown and delicious crust. Then you drop the temperature so that the roast can finish low and slow. Now, this is a fine philosophy, and yet fatally flawed, because the higher the heat involved, the more proteins in the meat are damaged. Therefore, the more juice is lost. So if we give it all this high heat at the very beginning, you're going to have more juice lost through the cooking process. So I say flip it. We're going to start the roast at a balmy 200 degrees until it reaches a certain internal temp. Then we'll put the spurs to it. In the meantime, we'll take a little time to prep and maybe check on the fire extinguisher. Good beef, appropriately aged, needs very little help in the flavor department. Rub down with a little canola oil, a few grinds of black pepper, and a little kosher salt is all we need. Now, aside from seasoning, the salt will actually coax protein-rich liquids to the surface of the meat, and that will aid in crust creation later on. Once upon a time, doneness was believed to be a factor of weight, time, and oven temperature. See? Beef. 20 minutes per pound at 300 degrees. This led to many a discouraged cook and disappointed diner because this formula cannot factor in the most critical piece of information in meat cookery, the shape of the meat to be cooked. And since that's a rather fuzzy piece of logic, I think we're gonna have to skip the time thing altogether. Truth is, the only way to know what's going on in your meat is to take its temperature. Now, there are a lot of different meat thermometers to choose from, but I like the probe style that can stay inside the meat throughout the cooking process. I like knowing what's going on. Positioning the probe is crucial. Just set the probe right in dead center and drive it down into center mass. Just make sure you don't hit any bones. Perfect. Well, what do you know? 210, I'll buy that. Now the rig comes out, lid comes off, the roast goes in. Watch out for the probe. Lid goes back on. Rig goes in the oven. And of course, so does the thermometer, just so you can keep a check on things. How's a 10-pound roast like a scrambled egg? Well, if they're both done when they come out of the pan, they'll be overdone by the time they hit the plate. That's because food doesn't stop cooking just because you turn off the heat. There's such a thing as carryover heat. And the greater the mass, the more the temperature is going to rise post-oven. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one temperature for a rib roast, that narrow range of joy in between 127 and about 132 degrees Fahrenheit, called medium rare. Now, I'm going to count on about 10 to 12 degrees of carryover, so I'm going to set the alarm on my thermometer to go off at 118 degrees. Now, how long is this going to take? Well, that depends on the roast. It seems we have arrived at our first thermal destination, 118 degrees. Now let's just take a look at what's happened inside. Now be careful when you open this, because there's going to be some steam, right? Open it away from you. Well, gee, nice, but kind of pallid, but that's okay. It's only mostly cooked at this point. Still, we're going to give this a rest. Just take it straight up to a cooling rack or a cutting board, whatever, and then cover it with foil. We don't want to pull out that probe, so just cut the foil to go around it. Be sure to turn off your alarm. There. Now, how long to let this rest? Well, until this stops going up. Should be just enough time to go to our next thermal destination, which is 500 degrees. And I can only hope that Chitty Chitty Bang Bang here can make it. Time to get crusty. Now, we may not really care about the internal temperature on this roast anymore. After all, it is thoroughly rested. But we do have an issue, which is we pull out this big metal probe and put this roast in the oven, it's going to spout like a whale. So just leave that where it is, but you don't have to plug this up anymore. Now, let's check on the oven. Say, 505 degrees. Who thought the old guy had it in him? Now, let's get this out as quickly as we can, carefully. Don't want to waste any of that energy. There, always open away. Slide that roast right back into place. There's going to be some sizzling, that's all right. Make sure you're centered up. Lid goes back on. And carefully back in. There we go. Now, we may not care about temperature anymore, but we do care about time at this point. And I'm figuring about 15 minutes between us and crust. Go beyond that and you're probably talking toast, another thing altogether. There we go. Now that is what I call crusty. As beautiful a sight as that is, though, there is another one waiting for us. But first, we've got to move this to a cutting board and just cover it with the very, very same piece of foil. I'm still leaving that little probe in there for now. And looky what we've got. That's what the French call fond. Basically means instant sauce. All we have to do is add water to liberate it. Of course, the first step to making a sauce out of this is to get rid of at least some of the grease that's accumulated in there. Whatever you do, do not throw this grease away because it is really great for making Yorkshire pudding, but that's another show. Ooh, don't want to waste that. Now put this back onto high heat. And as long as you've got cooktop-proof bakeware, this isn't gonna hurt anything. You could do it in metal if you've got a metal pan that fits, but glass is fine too. Now, in order to turn this into a sauce, we've got to deglaze these bits, dissolve them, and basically any type of water-type liquid will do. In fact, there's nothing quite like water to do the job. So, pour in 1 cup's worth. Of course, as wonderful a solvent as water is, it's not really famous for bringing a lot of flavor to the party. So I also like to add a cup of red wine. Now, as this comes to a boil, just scrape it. I like to use a wooden spatula. You're literally going to scrape those bits off of the bottom of the pan. Now, a lot of folks like to use just wine for this, but I really do think that when it reduces down, it's way, way too strong. So just keep scraping until you feel nothing but smooth glass, then reduce this by half. When your sauce is down by half, time for a quick herbal addition. Sage is what I like, and no, I don't want to chop it up because I just don't want to have to fish out all those little spent green bits later. 3 or 4 leaves will do. Just give it a good bruise and then toss it in. Let that cook for another 60 seconds, not a second longer, then strain and serve. Oh, we got meat to cut. Whenever carving time comes around, I reach for electric. This is why. These are for later, as in for me. Now, we've basically got a big, boneless roast. And I like to take off this big hunk of fat right here. This is why the dogs all love me. Now we're basically facing a big ribeye roast. Start slicing from the end and make sure you don't go less than a ½ inch. Now would be a good time for review.
Remember, when it comes to a great roast, where and what you buy matters a lot more than where you roast it. So talk to your butcher. If you don't have a butcher, well, find one soon. Dry age your beef in the refrigerator for 2 to 4 days. Bring it to room temperature. Season it simply but thoroughly. Roast it in a clean oven or a vessel that promotes even heating at 200 degrees or until it reaches an internal temperature of 118. Then give it a rest and then blast it at 500 for another 15 minutes or until crusty on the outside. Then deglaze and prepare to amaze. Now I know that standing rib roast is technically a special occasion kind of food, but hey, who's to say what qualifies as a special occasion? I mean, maybe your new sweepstakes entry came in the mail today, or maybe the nice lady who reads the meter dropped by, or maybe it's Wednesday, or maybe, excuse me, maybe your brother comes home from Las Vegas. Hey, how was the convention? You're kidding, they broke in? See you next time on Good Eats. I hope they didn't take anything important. Oh no, that's just freaking me. Say, they didn't happen to get my mixer, did they? No? Well, never mind. No, I'm having a TV dinner. Nah, no special occasion. You wouldn't like it.